Hello, today's video comes from Elena Blue and she said, "Hi sir, just to let you know I'm in year 10. I'm doing AQA English Literature and English. I'm currently working at a grade 6. Brought your English language guide, which is amazing. However, I'm having a few problems with the mark scheme on the English Literature. So could you do me a huge favour and mark this poetry comparison?" So she has taken Eden Rock and Walking Away from the Relationships cluster. I don't teach the relationships cluster to my students. We look at conflict, but it's still going to be relevant because I'm going to look at what the examiners are after. So Eleanor, thank you very much for posting. So in this video, I'm going to take you through the mark scheme that Eleanor said she was having problems with. Make sure it's relevant to you. GCSE English Literature, Paper 2, 8702. Okay, then I'm going to apply the mark scheme to Eleanor's essay, which I've copied into Word here. And then I'm going to compare it to the exemplar response from the AQA examiners, which I've also copied into Word. That comes from this document that you can get on the AQA website. So it's AQA 8702 examiner commentary sample answer, and there are 9 pages. We're going to be focusing on page 6, which looks at 2 conflict poems, Ozymandias and My Last Duchess, but I'm going to look at this in terms of skill, so it'll be just as relevant to relationships. And well, let's see what's in the examiner's head. Okay, well, the first thing I'd like to show you is the word count, actually, how much the examiner's expecting you to write. So in the examiner's version, the candidate had written only 310 words, whereas Eleanor, on the other hand, had written 527. So the first thing I'd like to show you is that the more you write, the higher your mark, but also the examiners aren't expecting an awful lot. Also, it seems. Okay, let's first look at what the examiner says about this 310 word answer, because it shows us what the examiner's actually thinking they're looking for. So, a thoughtful comparison. So your first job is to compare, which becomes exploratory as it develops. So the word develops there shows that they want you to be exploratory and explore ideas. The student holds both poems together, and I'll show you how they do that, which enables a considered comparison to be made. So all these are positive buzzwords: considered, exploratory, thoughtful, developed. By the end, this comparison becomes evaluative. So the examiner is asking you to make a judgment here, as there is a judgment made as to which poem demonstrates the effects of power more strongly. There are clear explanations, and these explanations are about the form of the poem, so don't neglect the form, and of the meaning of the language, and the ideas in the poem. And all these ideas come from looking at the poet's attitudes. So if you're writing about the poet's attitudes, you will always meet this part of the examiner's criteria. And the last comment, these are very well explained, all suggest that this will be quite a high marking answer. Now, you will notice that the examiners have chickened out of actually giving it a mark, which isn't very helpful, but is very typical of exams. Now, the reason for that is that this exam is new, and the examiners really don't know how people are going to do. But the other problem with the new exam is it doesn't matter how good you are, your grades will just be given to you according to a percentage. So, for example, if every single student in the country was good enough to get a level 7 or an A grade in old money, would they all get a level 7 or an A grade? No, they would not. What the exam board will do is just work out a percentage who are allowed the A grade to make sure that's in line with previous years. So the examiners won't commit to a mark. But there is another problem with this being a new exam, and I'll show you that using the mark scheme. So let's look at the language that is actually in the mark scheme, the language that tells the examiner what they should mark for. Well, you've got to be exploratory, and that was in those examiners' comments. You've got to be critical, Well, what does that mean? That's not really explained. Is it explained over here? Critical, exploratory, well-structured? No, it's just repeating the same words. It has a conceptualized approach. Well, is that explained? No, so I'll explain that in a minute. There will be fine-grained, insightful analysis. Is that explained? No, but I'll try and show you that as well. A judicious use of subject terminology. Well, we'll look at what subject terminology is. That won't be much of a mystery to you, I hope. And a convincing exploration of one or more ideas. Okay, so not many of those words were in the examiner's comments, although we might assume that very well explained might be the same as convincing. But we do know that the response we're going to look at is at least thoughtful because the examiner said so. It does have exploratory comparison. Here at the bottom of the top level, you only have to demonstrate elements of it, which the examiner's commentary suggested that the candidate did by being exploratory at the end. So the likelihood is the answer I'm going to show you is going to be round about 26, 27 marks perhaps, I don't know. Okay, now when we look at the next bullet points that they're after, exploration of the writer's methods or the writer's ideas or perspectives, you will notice that the word evaluative is not there, nor is it here, nor is it in this bit here. So why does the examiner think evaluation is a good thing? Well, the reason is the ability to be evaluative was something that was always rewarded in GCSE literature exams in the past. And what you have to remember is, although the examiners will be working with a new mark scheme, they'll still be going on their gut instinct based on years of experience as an examiner. So it's going to be worth being evaluative, offering some kind of evaluative comment in your conclusion, even though it's not in the mark scheme, because you want to control the examiner's thoughts. Okay, well, let's go through both answers a step at a time. So the examiner is looking for well-structured comparisons, and I've highlighted the words that make comparisons in yellow. So you can see that Elena has got similarly, likewise, both. This is contrasted, both. This differs, and if overall will be a comparative, but I've put it in green because it signals a conclusion. So you can see she has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 comparisons, and she tries to make a comparison in each paragraph. The sample answer, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 2 in each paragraph or more. So you can see that making constant comparisons is going to give you that well-structured response that the examiner is after. In the examiner's response, there are more contrasts. So although, however, and however. And in Eleanor's response, we have this differs and this is contrasted. So it may be that the examiners are showing us they want more differences than similarities, although whether things are different or similar is not in the mark scheme. Yet it doesn't matter whether you choose difference or similar according to the mark scheme, but in the examiner's exemplar, it looks like they're more impressed with differences. And the reason for that is that the comparison that also leads to a difference shows the examiner that you are being evaluative. Remember that word. So Eleanor's conclusion is this: overall, both poets express their awareness of the inevitability of any type of change, but both speakers have very different attitudes and feelings about the matter, which is reflected towards the end of the poem. So actually I should have highlighted, I'll just do that now, the word but here in your conclusion, because what Eleanor's doing is quite a sophisticated technique. She's saying that there's a similarity, but actually within that similarity there is a difference. And that's exactly what the writer does here. Ultimately, both leaders are shown by the poet's to be corrupt. Both poets feel that power in the wrong hands has devastating consequences on the innocent. So that's the same as the first part of Eleanor's sentence. But then instead of the but, this candidate has however. Although both poets show that the corruption is punished, perhaps it's the Duke who is shown more clearly to be the true despot. And that's where you have the evaluation. The Duke is more of a despot than Ozymandias, according to this reader. So this is a strong clue that in your conclusion you want to be evaluative by finding a similarity but then showing how that's also different. And actually the examiners are giving that big clue that they want that all the way through. If you can do it in every paragraph, find similarities but then say how those similarities, if you look at them more subtly, are still different, you will get much higher marks. The final point you'll notice about the structure is that the examiners don't want you to write all about one poem first and then write about the second poem comparing backwards. Instead, what they're recommending is that you make a point about one poem and then in the same paragraph you make a similarity and a difference with the next. And that's exactly what Elena has done. Each paragraph is comparing the same aspect of both poems. So she's making a comparison each time, comparing each poem as she goes. One advantage of that is that she knows she'll be comparing all the time. And the second advantage is that she knows each comparison will be relevant. And if you just write about one poem first here, and then the second poem here, you'll make random comparisons which aren't necessarily relevant at all. So always have structures in your paragraphs like this, where you write about both poems in the same paragraph. Okay, the next thing the examiners want is a conceptualized approach. And though they don't explain what this means, I can easily show you. It's basically talking about the poet's purpose. And the place to do that is right at the beginning, your first paragraph. So Causley's Eden Rock presents a change in atmosphere, the nature of relationships, and the inability and uncertainty of the poet's relationships with his parents as he enters a new phase in his life by writing about a significant past memory and by using a wide range of poetic techniques. So the purpose here, though it's a quite long-winded explanation, is to show that relationships are unstable. Let's see. Similarly, Day-Lewis in Walking Away also reflects on the instability. So that's the same purpose and uncertainty, which is the same purpose that she had up here, look, in the change of relationships. And by writing about the poet's purpose all the way through, you will be conceptualized. And if you come back to that purpose in the conclusion, it also will be conceptualized. So here she attempts to, Elena says, very different attitudes and feelings about the matter, but she doesn't explain what those different attitudes are at the ending. Here, although of course she may explain it there. So looking at the ending of the poem is another way to be conceptualized because you will be showing how the poet's viewpoint appears to have changed. Here we can see the Duke is more clearly the true despot, as Browning uses the dramatic monologue to show, that's his purpose, isn't it? To show firsthand how completely self-absorbed he is. Does this candidate also talk about the purpose of the other poem? Yes, both leaders are shown by the poets to be corrupt, so that's their purpose. And that makes it more conceptualized. Okay, the next thing we want to focus on is this idea of judicious references, and nobody explains what judicious means. It means well chosen. Oh, fine. Well, how do you know your quotation is well chosen? Well, there's actually a really easy shorthand that examiners use. And that shorthand is this. Do you have lots of short quotations that fit into your sentence? So this candidate has quite a few of those. Short little quotations that fit in the sentences, and Elena has slightly longer ones here, but they still fit in the sentence just about. But up here she has far more shorter ones that do fit in, and that's what judicious means. The more short quotations you get into your essay, the more judicious it will appear. Then you have this very puzzling criteria about your writing being fine-grained in its insightful analysis. I don't know, perhaps this examiner is also a carpenter in their spare time and they're used to looking at the fine grains of wood. Fine-grained here means looking at layers of meaning, really. That's what they're after. And how on earth can you show the examiner you're looking at layers of meaning really quickly in an essay? Well, I'll show you. So I've highlighted the things that both essays have in common here, but what I haven't highlighted is this kind of tentative language that we'll see in this essay here, that Elena doesn't use yet and should do. It's actually just a little trick, which I'll demonstrate to you now by reading this response. What you'll notice here is the words I've put in bold and italics. So Shelley describes Ozymandias's sneer of cold command as if to suggest that he is a cruel and heartless leader. So this is tentative language that suggests the interpretation is a good one, but though it may not be the only one. That is a way that you can show you're being fine-grained. Let's go down here. Ozymandias might have had cold command of his lands, just like the Duke gave commands. Again, this writer is saying that there's a possibility that Ozymandias didn't have cold command of his lands. That's actually a very weak point here, but the candidate has used the tentative language which the examiner is impressed by. It's a better version down here. It could be argued that the Duke has also been left with nothing. He has a statue of Neptune, which is made of cold bronze. So again, not a fully explained argument there, but the tentative language suggests that it's being more fine-grained. And then the most successful one is at the end. So however, although both poets show that this corruption is punished in the end, perhaps it is the Duke who is shown more clearly to be the true despot, as Browning uses the dramatic monologue to show firsthand how completely self-absorbed he is. And that's also an unusual view because obviously the Duke is only a ruler of a very small kingdom compared to Ozymandias. And that's why this tentative language is used here. So that's a way, if you like, to trick the examiner that you're being fine-grained. It definitely shows that you're being evaluative because you're constantly making comparisons and trying to decide which idea is superior or which poem is superior or which interpretation is superior. Okay, the next thing the examiner wants is some kind of discussion about the form and structure of the poem. What they don't want is a separate paragraph at random that just bangs on about the structure of the poem. They want you to try and integrate that into your argument. So if we go back to the examiner's commentary again, we can see this comment. There are clear explanations of the effect of form on meaning. So what on earth did this essay have in it about form? Very little, actually. But what it did have was this idea that the My Last Duchess is a monologue, and it's a dramatic monologue, and this wasn't just random information. The dramatic monologue is used for a purpose, and it's to show how self-absorbed the Duke is. There's no reference to the fact that Ozymandias is a sonnet, which is normally a love poem, which could reflect Ozymandias's self-love, not the love of the speaker towards Ozymandias himself, because that love is treated ironically. The speaker is disgusted by Ozymandias. So even though there's no discussion of the form of Ozymandias, they're still getting credit for it because they've done it so well on the other poem. Well, if we look at Elena's, she has looked at form and structure, so she's looking at the rhyme scheme. Let's see what she says about it. This is contrasted in Walking Away, where the simple regular rhyme pattern and structure remains constant throughout, which reflects the poet's tranquility and him having to come to terms with his son gaining independence. that actually does work. She's made a point about the tranquil effect of the rhyme, so it actually feels tranquil when you read it, and she's linked that to the poet's purpose here. The poet is also feeling tranquil. So an easy way to gain marks up here, she talks about a measured structure that is simplistic, but is it linked to the poet's purpose? Let's look. Both poems have a calm and peaceful tone to them throughout, which could perhaps reflect the poet's attitude towards change, which is created by this simplistic and measured structure. So this would suggest that the poets have a simplistic and measured attitude towards the change. I don't think Elena fully develops that point, but as you could see, you don't need a very well developed point to get the marks. However, you should develop it because you want to be brilliant at English. Right, another skill that I want to show you is that when you're making a comparison, you need to be as specific as possible, not general. So if we take this paragraph here, let's have a look. It could be argued that the Duke has been left with nothing. He has a statue of Neptune which is made of cold bronze. He doesn't realise this himself, however, as he cares nothing for human relationships and is far more concerned, like Ozymandias, with his pride and reputation. So those are very specific things. Let's contrast this to Elena. This idea is further suggested when he mentions that love is provided in the letting go. This all suggests that the poet's viewpoints and attitudes are very different towards their change of character and relationship. Well, that's vague, isn't it? How are they very different? And you need to be as specific as possible in what you're saying. Another example is up here where Eleanor's picked on something brilliant here. The presence of biblical language in both poems, which further emphasize this idea. Well, what idea? We'd have to read back further, but without quoting the biblical language and delving into it, you're not really exploring. And this would have been something that would distinguish your essay, Elena, from other students. Focusing in on the biblical language would definitely get you into the top mark range, because it would force you to interpret why the poet's using this biblical language, what effect is it he or she is expecting to have on the reader, and that's a lovely opportunity to show off your knowledge about context as well. So if we go back to the mark scheme, contextual factors, well, the Bible will always be an interesting context, but it also allows you to have detailed links between texts, so not just the poems but the text of the Bible as well. And I'd recommend all my students to be able to use biblical allusion where they can, because so many poets reference the Bible. It's an easy way to show your thinking in this area. It will always be exploratory because other students won't be looking at that biblical language, and it will always get you into the top marks. Okay, the final skill that the examiner's after is a convincing exploration. Well, how do you show that you've been convincing? You know, what are you trying to convince the reader about? Well, that's where that word where the word evaluative comes in, and where that tentative language comes in. That shows that you're exploring and forces the examiner to put you in the top band. So my instinct, Elena, without reading out your whole essay to everyone, of course you can read it on this video to compare them, is that you would get at least the top of the band below. You're definitely thoughtful all the way through and developed. You can just see in how much you've written that that's true. You have covered all three assessment objectives. You've compared all the way through, apt references, those judicious references that are short. You've written about the methods with the subject terminology, and you've considered a little bit of the poet's ideas and perspectives. So you've done all of that. Hopefully you realise what you need to do to get into this band, which is use that exploratory tentative language and to start evaluating as you go through. And remember, the way to evaluate, apart from using the tentative language, was to find a similarity and then immediately show how that's slightly different. And again, we have the similarity, but then it's slightly different, and the similarity, and then slightly different. And you do that quite often. So here's a similarity, but then there's a difference. Here's a similarity, then there are several differences. In this paragraph, it's just a similarity, and in this one, it's just a similarity. So rather like this candidate here that the examiner liked, as you go further forward in your essay, you're making more exploratory comparisons where you begin with these similarities and then look at the differences. So I would be happy to move yours just into the top band, level 6, but as you can see from this, another examiner might say, no, I'm going to keep you at the top of level 5. Hopefully it's really clear to you how to get into level 6. This is very much at the bottom of the level 6 for me. It's not really detailed enough. And the strong clue from the examiner is that they want your comparison to become evaluative as early as possible. So there you go. I hope that's helped you work out how to get top marks. And if it hasn't, don't worry, I'll be making lots more videos specifically comparing the poems in the exam. So good luck. Don't forget to subscribe if you want more. And if you'd like my English language guide, the link is posted in the description below. Good luck.